I am a student of apologies. What I mean is, I love to study apologies. I'm fascinated by them. You can learn a lot from a person by how they apologize. In my opinion, a good person, a real mensch, is not someone who never does anything wrong, because that's impossible. A good person is someone who is able to give a true apology. And so for me, I search them out. I listen to apologies, I read them. It's become a hobby of sorts. The good, the bad, and the ugly, I want to learn from all of them. Now, there are a lot of examples of bad apologies. We see this often in Hollywood press releases carefully written by publicists, concerned only with the star's public image and not actually concerned with rectifying a wrong. We have great examples of bad apologies from politicians who, instead of taking responsibility, sling mud on every other single person or organization that they can possibly blame. On Facebook and Twitter, everyone is in attack mode. Everyone is talking at each other. No one is actually listening. Two of the most important words during Yomim Noraim, the days of awe, are I'm sorry. Last week, I met with the religious school students on Zoom. I tried to use the 15 minutes I have with them to instill some Jewish teaching. And this past week, of course, it's been about the high holidays. And while talking about teshuvah on the turning inward to account for oneself, I found myself telling these young humans that adults could actually learn a bit from younger people about how to say, I'm sorry. When we're younger, it's one of the earliest lessons we receive in school. In order to get along, we have to apologize when we hurt someone. But in truth, it gets harder and harder as we age to say, I'm sorry. We get stuck in our ways. We hold grudges. We say, I'm not going to apologize to her until she apologizes to me. We think, I didn't even do anything wrong. He's just being overly sensitive. And the stakes only get higher as time goes by. Relationships are broken, families estranged over our inability to be accountable to one another. Why can't we hold ourselves accountable for the mistakes we make? Harriet Lerner, the author of Why Won't You Apologize, argues the greatest obstacle we have to mending our relationship is defensiveness. It's human nature. We project a positive self-image at all costs. We think, I'm a good person, therefore I couldn't hurt someone else for absolutely no reason. There was a reason. It must be their fault. This is a false sense of self-protection. Rabbi Alan Liu teaches, I wonder how many of us cling tenaciously to a version of the story of our lives in which we appear to be utterly blameless and innocent, that we become oblivious to the pain we have inflicted on others, no matter how unconsciously or inevitably or innocently we may have inflicted it. How many of us refuse to give up our version of the past? It is our defensiveness that makes an apology impossible. And unfortunately, defensiveness is human. It's automatic. But the work of teshuvah is noticing when we become defensive. We can catch ourselves in the act. When someone confronts us with our bad behavior, do we automatically listen to the flaws in their argument, for exaggerations and inaccuracies that we can then use once they stop talking to prove we are right and they're actually in the wrong? That's defensiveness. Another obstacle to a true apology is the blame game. We get caught up in who's more to blame or who started it and wait for the other person to apologize first. There's a story in our Talmud about this very instinct. It's actually a little gross. Once Rabbi Yirmiyah insulted Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Yirmiyah went to Abba's house seeking to apologize. He sat outside Abba's home waiting for him, and while he was sitting there, Rabbi Abba's maid accidentally poured out the household sewage onto Yirmiyah's head. Naturally, Yirmiyah left. When Abba heard about this, he went and sought out Yirmiyah's forgiveness. Abba went to apologize to him for an accident that he didn't even cause, without expecting Yirmiyah to apologize to him first. Both rabbis, the Talmud teaches, were concerned more with teshuvah, with repairing this wrong between them, than with who was more right or who started the fight to begin with. Neither waited for the other to come to them first. The sages instruct that for sins against God, prayer atones. But for sins against another, only that repentance can atone. In other words, we can't come to services and beat our chests for hurting another person. We have to go to that person to try to make amends. But for some of us, we've never been taught how to properly apologize. I mentioned earlier that we learn as young children we must apologize to a classmate if we hurt them. However, over time, many children learn that if they mumble the prerequisite, "I'm sorry," they will be let off the hook. No real teshuvah is done, and the child is likely to have the same issue come up again and again. So what is a true apology? As a collector of apologies, I've come across different lists of rules for apologies, and I'd like to share with you 5 of them. Number 1, no buts. A true apology does not include a criticism or an excuse. Saying, "I'm sorry I yelled at you in front of our friends, but you were really getting on my nerves," is not an example of a true apology. It is okay to say to another person, "You were really getting on my nerves," but we can't call that an apology. A true apology is, "I'm sorry I yelled at you in front of our friends." Number 2, saying, "I'm sorry you felt hurt," is not a true apology. This pseudo-apology is pretty common. It takes the blame off of the one apologizing and puts the onus on the hurt party's sensitivity. "I'm sorry you felt hurt by my words" is not taking responsibility for the words that you said and the hurt that you caused. Impact is more important than intention. Instead, we say, "I'm sorry for the hurtful things I said." Number 3, it's not about you. A true apology should not be offered to make you feel better if it risks making the hurt party feel even worse. An apology is not to soothe your own guilt. A true apology, this is number 4, a true apology includes a plan of restitution. It includes a promise of how you will do better in the future. It also does not ask the hurt party to do anything at all, not even forgive you in return. "I apologized for this, so now can we move on?" is not a true apology. It is not a bargaining tool. And what separates Judaism from other traditions is that there is no commandment to forgive. There is a commandment to make amends, but one is not commanded to forgive. That is left to the hurt party to decide. And finally, number 5, a true apology means you do not continue with that behavior. If you apologize for losing your temper, and then you apologize again for losing your temper, and again, eventually your apology will mean nothing. A true apology includes the work to stop the hurtful behavior. Maimonides, the great medieval philosopher, said that teshuvah is only complete when we find ourselves in exactly the same position we were in when we went wrong, and we choose to behave differently. But then an objection was raised. Well, what if the circumstances in question never repeat themselves? How can we then make complete teshuvah? Don't worry, the Rambam said. The circumstances always do. These are the makings of a true apology. And yes, it's more complex than just saying, I'm sorry. It's difficult to do right. And perhaps that's why we return to it year after year, reminding ourselves we need to take account of our behavior before moving into a new year. But the silver lining in all of this is that Judaism believes we can change. In fact, our tradition is founded on it. I want to conclude with something that Rabbi Sachs teaches. He writes, God trusts us and empowers us to make our own decisions. And that means that God empowers us to make mistakes, to get it wrong. That is what it is to be human. God does not ask us to be superhuman. We sin, but God forgives us. We err, but through our errors, we learn. And someone once asked Rabbi Sachs, isn't Judaism full of guilt? Yes, he replied, but it is also full of forgiveness. Judaism teaches that to err is human. We can't avoid it. And so there is no shame in our making mistakes. So let us not be afraid to take responsibility for them. Let us hold ourselves accountable. Let us learn how to do a true apology. It is the most human thing that we can do. Good Yom Tov.